I want to read one verse tonight from the King James Version. It is a verse that many of us have been quoting for most of our lives, but we quote it wrong. Psalm number 23 and verse 4. Psalm number 23 and verse 4. Most of us, when we read this verse, we say, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." You've been reciting it all your life, and you say, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." And if you were in school, you wouldn't read it like that. Because the verse does not say, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." The verse says, "Yea, though I walk." Will you read it with me, please? "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." Hey, take the word "yea" out. Let's read together. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." I want you to turn to your neighbor and shout to them, I'm going through. If you got a neighbor on the other side, shout to them, I'm going through. Amen. You may be seated in the Lord's Prayer. Hey, some of us, all of 2018, we felt like we were going through. Okay, deep saints show up when it gets close to holidays. You felt like you were going through a whole lot of stuff, that pressures and weights and struggles were a part of your regular existence. You felt like you were going through. I want your declaration to be tonight, not that you're going through, but that you're going. I'm going through. I am, Brother Rick, a huge Florida Gators fan, especially when it comes to football. I'm a Florida Gators fan. I didn't wear this by accident tonight. I'm a Florida Gators fan. I have learned that when it comes to watching the Gators, your experience depends upon your perspective. Okay, for example, Minister Ralph, I have watched some Gator games from my living room. That's a different perspective, because when I'm hollering, ain't nobody hollering but me. I've also been invited to some game watch parties where everybody was hollering. That's an awesome experience when you go to a Gator party at someone's home and everybody is hollering. I've also had the opportunity to attend University of Florida football games, both here in the swamp and in other places around the country. I've had the great privilege over the years of being able to travel with the team, on the team bus, with them. It's a great experience, but it changes your perspective. Because when I go to the games and I'm traveling with the team, I'm actually on the sideline. That's a whole different perspective from the way I watch it at my house or the way I watch it when I'm at a game watching party. I've also had the opportunity, Sister Ramona, to sit in the stands and watch a game. That's a whole lot of fun, especially when you're high-fiving people you don't even know. When they say, come on, Gators, get up and go. There's no separation. There's no division. Everybody is rejoicing together, and if you ain't rejoicing, you need to be on the other side of the field. So I've had the opportunity to sit in the stands and watch the game. I've also had the opportunity to sit in sky boxes and watch the game. That's a whole different kind of experience. I've been in personal sky boxes that belong to individual people. I've also had the opportunity on several occasions. Brother Darrell went with me the last time that I was invited to watch the game from the president's skybox. That's a whole different experience. It's an endless buffet, and we ate good the whole time. It's just an awesome experience. There's some people in this room, two of them that I know, who have also had the opportunity to play for the Florida Gators football team. So I've been on the field on the sideline. They've been on the field in the game. One of the most fascinating things to me about the Florida Gators or the NCAA period when it comes to football, whether you notice or not, there's a fella who stands on the sideline, and his only responsibility is to make sure that the game stops when the commercials come on, and to make certain that when it's time for the commercials to go off, that the game comes back on, that everybody starts playing again. It's a fella stands on the sideline with a microphone in his ear, holding a cord, and the only thing he don't care what the score is. He don't care what y'all eating in the stands. He don't care about the hot dogs, the peanuts. He don't care about who the Gators are playing. His only responsibility is to see to it that the game stops when it's time for commercials, and that the game starts again when the commercials are over. Hey, here's what I'm getting at. Everybody sees the game from their own perspective. The way that it looks to the players when they're looking through the grill on their helmet is different from the way the game looks when you're sitting in a box. Have you ever wondered what it would sound like from the ball's perspective? What would the football say? One man football says, I can't believe they just kicked me like that. They say some stuff like this. I can't believe dude just dropped me like that. I can't believe he let me hit him in the chest and bounce off his chest without him catching it. Sometimes he'll say, I can't believe he dropped me before he got into the end zone. Your experience depends upon your perspective. And the problem that we have had in reciting the 23rd Psalm over the years is that we have looked at this psalm through the eyes of a shepherd. We have looked at this psalm, most preachers preach it this way. We've looked at it through the eyes of church folks. When we talk about the shepherd, we say that's the pastor. You talk about the sheep, you say that's the members in the church. No, you miss the entire value of the 23rd Psalm until you look at the psalm through the eyes of the sheep. Can I tell you several things about sheep that maybe you did not know? Here's the first one. Several characteristics about sheep. Here's the first one. Sheep are short. Which means sheep, because of the length of their legs, they stand low down to the ground. So that when you read the 23rd Psalm, recognize that the sheep in the psalm, from their perspective, they're low down because they got little bitty sheep legs. So they're low down. Sheep are short. Hey, here's the second thing. Sheep have limited vision. Limited vision. When you study sheep, one of the things you'll learn, Sister Erica, a sheep can see wide, but it can't see far. All right, so the sheep is low down to the ground. They can see wider than we can, but they can't see far. A sheep struggles with depth perception. They're already low down. They can see stuff happening on the side of them, but they cannot pay attention to detail because they have poor depth perception. They have limited vision. Hey, third thing you need to know about a sheep, sheep get heavy when they get wet. Hardly anybody, Minister Lawson, keeps a sheep as a pet. The reason people own sheep, and most folk don't own one sheep, they own a whole flock of sheep. And the reason they own them is so that they can shear them or shave the wool off of the sheep and sell the wool. You don't hear about folks eating sheep. You don't hear about them naming their sheep. They don't keep them as pets. They don't end up normally on the table because every year there is sheep shearing time when you shave the sheep and sell the wool. Sheep are low down to the ground. Sheep are short. Sheep have limited vision, and sheep get heavy when they get wet. With all that wool they have on them, if they end up in a body of water, the wool on their bodies soaks up the water and the sheep can't move. They low down. They have limited vision and they get heavy when they get wet. Hey, let me tell you a fourth thing about a sheep. Sheep are subject to all types of predators. One of the worst things that attack sheep is parasites and flies. The parasites go in through the nostril cavities of the sheep, make their way to the brain of the sheep, and drive the sheep crazy. As graphic as this may sound, one of the worst things that commonly happens to sheep is that flies will lay eggs in the sheep's nose. And as that larvae develops, it antagonizes the sheep and drives them crazy. It happens to all sheep. Wherever you see sheep, you see flies looking to lay eggs in their noses. And those fly larvae and parasites drive the sheep crazy. They low down, they got limited vision, they get heavy when they get wet, and they are subject to all types of predators. Parasites, flies, and wolves who seek to devour them. Hey, remember, they're low down and they got limited vision, so that if they stray away from the sheepfold, they become easy prey for the wolves that are around them. You cannot understand the 23rd Psalm until you look at it from the perspective of the sheep. Which means the purpose of the 23rd Psalm is not to teach you how to be a better sheep. It's to teach you how much you need a shepherd. Because you're low down. I don't mean you're an evil person. I mean your perspective is down here. So you need a shepherd up here because your perspective is down here. Your vision is limited. You can see on the side, but you can't see much in front. And if you get near water, you already have blind. And if you get near water, The water swells up your wool, and you can't go nowhere. You're low down, half blind, can't get wet. Flies are running after you that you can't even see to lay eggs in your nose to drive you crazy. Wolves are waiting on you to stray away from the flock so they can eat you up. This passage does not teach you how to be a good sheep because there is no such thing. You can't be a good sheep. This is not to tell you how to be a better sheep. This is to point out to you how much you need a shepherd. There are no other verses in a collection that are quoted more often than the 23rd Psalm. It is written by David, who himself was a shepherd and the son of a shepherd. So when David writes this psalm, he does not write it from the perspective of the shepherd. He writes from the perspective of the sheep. And what I want to do is to use this common passage as a set of blueprints on how you can go through in 2019. Watch this. You went through in 2018, but you can go through in 2019. You went through some stuff in 18, but you can go through some stuff in 19. Thought, what are you getting at? I'm so glad you asked. You all ask such wonderful questions around holidays. Sometimes you've got to press your way through. Verse 4 says, when you read it in the King James Version, it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. In the New American Standard, it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Here's what I want to share with you. Even though you have a good shepherd, it does not stop you from going through the valley. Which means you love Jesus, but you're going to go, you're going to go through some stuff. But the psalmist says, watch this, he breaks from the calmness of verse 1 through verse 3 and focuses in verse 4 on the valley that is as dark as death's shadow. And he says, even if I've got to go through the valley with my good shepherd, hey, watch this, which means from the sheep's perspective, the sheep has already said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still water. He's already talked about how good the shepherd is in verse 1 through verse 3. But then he says in verse 4 that even if I've got to go through the valley, the same God who took care of me in green pastures is the same God who's with me while I'm in the valley. And the psalmist says, now watch him. He low down. He can't see. Swell up when he gets wet. Flies are looking for him. Wolves are on the attack. But the sheep says, even if I've got to go through the valley, I will fear no evil. Because thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The rod was a short stick with two knobs on the end. The shepherd would use the rod to beat off the wolves, and sometimes the shepherd would use the rod to correct the sheep. The staff was a long stick with a hook on the end, and whenever a sheep got out of line, the shepherd would extend that long rod and pull the sheep back in place. So that even though I got to walk through the valley, I've made the mistake, Sister Ronisha, of preaching this, and one of the things I say is sometimes what we wish we could do is run around the valley instead of walking through the valley. I've made that mistake. The reality is valleys you can't run around, you got to walk through. Because ain't no shepherd running no sheep. He's walking the sheep. And you don't walk around the valley, you got to go through the valley. Hey, and God's word to somebody in here is don't fall apart when trouble comes. Sometimes you just got to press. This ain't for the little saints, this for the big saints. Some stuff you got to press your way through. Hey, that's not all. Some things you got to praise your way through. Deep saints show up around holidays. I get so disturbed in this modern church age where people operate at either one extreme or another. And some people try to treat praise like it's a magic bullet. But praise is not something you turn on when you get to church. Whenever you recognize how good God is and how good God has been, ain't nobody got to ask you to praise him. Ain't nobody got to tell you to praise him. You just can't help yourself. Hey, Minister Doug, have you ever noticed this? All of the other verses in Psalm 23 talk about God. It is only in verse 4 and verse 5 that David talks to God. All of the verses in the whole psalm, David talks about God. But he got to a certain place where he stopped talking about him and started talking to him. The devil is not impressed by what you got to say about God if you ain't never got nothing to say to God. Sometimes you've got to praise your way through. Watch this. Verse 4 is an even though verse. That means even though I go through the valley, the Lord is with me. That's an even though verse. Verse 4 and 5 together are wait a minute verses. Verse 4 and 5 together are wait a minute verses. That's where you've been talking about God, and while you talking about him, that thing get good to you, and you say, wait a minute. Instead of me talking about him, maybe I ought to talk to him. Henry J. Hines was a chef and an inventor. He came from a successful family, and one day he went into the bank to apply for a loan, and the loan officer said to Henry J. Hines, "Sir, based on your financial record, when I look at what you've been giving to your church, if you would have taken that same money and kept it, you would need to come in here for a loan." When Henry J. Hines heard that, he got up and started walking out of the man's office. And the man said, "Mr. Hines, I didn't say I wasn't going to give you the loan. I'm just telling you if you would manage your money better, you wouldn't have to ask for the loan." Henry J. Hines responded. He said, "Sir, my problem is not with you." He said, but what I've been doing in the past is I've been giving God 10% of what I've made. He say, but something dawned on me while you were talking. And instead of me giving God 10 and living out of the 90, I'm going to give God the 90 and learn how to live out of the 10. Henry J. Hines say, wait a minute. With all that God has done for me, giving him a dime out of every dollar, what would happen if I invested more in him? And tell me the last time you didn't walk into a restaurant and see a bottle of Heinz ketchup on the table. You tell me who came out on top. Verse 4 and verse 5, they are not even though verses, they are wait a minute verses. Sometimes you can be in church singing what you heard in rehearsal. Lord, you are good and your mercy endureth forever. But sometimes the Lord will hit you in mid-song. I wish I had somebody who knew what I was talking about. Have you ever had the Lord to hit you in the midst of something that you thought was comfortable, to have him to show you things you ain't never seen before? See, if you've never needed mercy, it's kind of hard to sing about what you ain't never gone through. It's one thing when you join in with people who are talking about how good God has been. It's something else when you can talk to God for yourself. Hey, I'm not making it up. Verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He's talking about God. Verse 2, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He's talking about God. Verse 3, he restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. But then when he got to verse 4, he said, wait a minute. Instead of me talking about God, that thing got so good to him, he had to talk to God. And he says in verse 4, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Dr. Lever say, never read the Bible too fast. You read more than what you catch. Remember, the sheep is low down because they got little bitty legs. They have terrible depth perception. They can't see real good. They have a limited vision. They get heavy when they get wet, and they're subject to all types of predators. So the low down blind sheep that can't afford to get wet, who's constantly having to be on guard for predators, the sheep says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. The sheep says, I'm in the valley with wolves all around me, but the shepherd is still providing for me. Can I ask you what you worried about? If you have the kind of shepherd who will take care of you even while you're in the valley. Hey, sometimes you got to press your way through. Sometimes you got to praise your way through. That's what he does in verse 4 and verse 5. Here's the last thing and I'm done. Sometimes you've got to plan your way around. Some of us remember when all of your clothes weren't the same. That you had school clothes, church clothes, play clothes. School clothes you wore to school, church clothes you wore to church, play clothes you played in. When you came home from school, you had to take off your school clothes, put on your play clothes, which means your play clothes, your school clothes and your church clothes were not everyday clothes. Verse 4 is not an everyday verse, which means every day to you should not feel like you are going through the valley that is as dark as death's shadow. Verse 4 is an extreme verse that should only apply to extreme circumstances. Hey, If all of your days seem like verse 4 days, maybe you haven't learned to appreciate verse 1 through verse 3. What most of your days should feel like is the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. That means I shall not lack any good thing. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. Because if the waters were rushing fast, because sheep get heavy when they get wet, the sheep would soak up the water, fall into the water, and drown. But the shepherd leads the sheep beside the still waters. All of that you find in verse 1 through verse 3. He restores my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Then he gets to verse 4 and says, even if, which means despite all that I got going for me in 1 through 3, even if I end up in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Here's God's word to somebody in here. If all of your days seem like emergency days, you're not trusting God the way you should be trusting God. Because if you really understood that he was your shepherd and you would not want, you wouldn't fall apart every day. Some of us need to stay off the infranet. Your whole world is out there for people to see. Every time you go through something, the whole world sees what you're going through. You shouldn't be going through that much. Hey, watch this. Some people are always talking about, I can't believe how low down people are. People will let you down. You can't trust nobody. At some point, you can't blame other folks for that. Sometimes you got to take responsibility for it yourself. Hey, if you keep getting your throat cut, why do you keep hanging out with cutthroat people? So sometimes you got to press your way through. Sometimes you got to praise your way through. But sometimes you need to plan your way around. All of your prayers should not be 911 emergencies. Sometimes you need to dial 411 to get you some better information. Sometimes you got to plan your way around. Hey, which leads two things I want to recommend that you do. Getting out of 2018, going into 2019. Two things I want to recommend that you do. Here's the first one. Change your declarations. You got to change what comes out of your mouth. Hey, if you always talking about how broke you are, trust me, you're going to stay broke. You always telling people, I can't find nobody, everybody I found, they leave me with a broken heart. Oh, hey, what you're saying to the world is, you don't like you. And if you, because ain't nobody with you while you typing and texting. If you can't stand you, don't ask me to sign up for a shift. You need to change your declaration. What are you saying, Thor? Instead of always going to God, telling him how big your problems are, maybe you should go to your problems. Watch this, because some of us want to say, go to your problems and tell them how big your God is. All right, let me shift it to the Psalm 23 version. Instead of going to God, telling him how big your problems are, maybe you should go to your problems and tell them how good your shepherd is. I thought y'all would be happy about that. Change your declarations. Watch verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. There's no lack, there's no depression, there's no disturbance. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. When was the last time you looked in the mirror and told yourself what a good job the Lord did in making you? We so busy talking about all the stuff we want to change. Watching these reality shows, trying to get something sucked out from here and put somewhere else, instead of learning how to appreciate how the Lord has made you. Because the bigger you are, the harder you are to kidnap. You ain't never heard about nobody big getting taken from no bus stop. It's some benefits. Ain't nobody just running off with you. He just grabbed and threw in the van. No, he didn't either. No, he didn't. He ain't just grab her, throw her. No. Change your declarations. Watch his declaration again in verse 6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's a declaration. And if you're going to be successful in 2019, change how you talk. Change your declarations. I went to my chiropractor, Brother Alvin, a couple of weeks ago. I had an MRI done. Results of the MRI came back. Chiropractor comes in the room. He said, Mr. Thorpe, you have 3 bulging discs pushing against your sciatic nerve, and you have arthritis. I said, wow. He said, Pastor Thorpe, it's not because you've been doing something wrong. He said, it just comes with age. He said, you're getting old. I'm like, bro, I'm 45. He said, you're getting old. He said, and I say, yeah, because I joined CrossFit, and after my first CrossFit section, my back was hurting so bad, I had to set up appointments with the chiropractor. That's how I started going to his office. You know what he said to me, Mr. Dog? He said, CrossFit is for young people in their 20s. He said, that ain't for you. I almost slipped into a state of depression. I'm like, bro, you trying to say I'm old? And I kid you not, Sister Mary, this week went to the mailbox, got my mail out the box, letter in the box from ARP. I said, for real? Is that how we doing this? Y'all trying to recruit me already? Is that how we gonna do this? And I was feeling bad. Just Pat, I was feeling bad. But the Lord got a hold of me last week. And he said, Thorpe, you have already been through enough not to go through. I wish I had somebody who knew what I was talking about. So what I started doing is what the doctor told me I could not do. Doc says, Thorpe, all that weight you've been lifting all them years, don't do that no more. That's for young people. Don't do that no more. That's why your back tore up. So I decided, all right, so I got to give up lifting weights and exercising. I got to give up my Coca-Cola because I can't have caffeine because I'm struggling to go to sleep. I take medicine. I say the devil is a lie. Life is too short to stay in the valley all the time. Which means if I got a verse 1 through 3 God, I can change my declarations and what I allow to come out of my mouth. If you tell yourself you are old, you will start looking old. You will start acting old. I'm not saying to act outside of your character, get out of your age bracket, but some stuff you just got to learn how to enjoy. Change your declaration. Hey, here's the last thing. I'm out. You got to change your appreciation. Change what comes out of your mouth, but change how you appreciate God. Hey, remember this. Sheep are short, low down to the ground. They got limited vision, soak up water if they ever get wet, and wolves, parasites, and flies are always looking for them to lay eggs in their nose or to destroy them. Watch what the psalmist says in verse 2. Watch his level of appreciation for how good God has been. The sheep says in verse 2, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. When those parasites get into the nostril cavities of the sheep, drives the sheep crazy, they're agitated all the time, so the shepherd has to make them lay down. But when he makes them lay down, if a sheep gets hungry, it increases the agitation. So the shepherd says, I'm going to make you lay down, but you're going to lay down in green pastures, which means he brings a buffet to you instead of you having to get in your car to find a golden corral. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. I've been waiting to get there all night long. When the shepherd puts oil on the head of the sheep, because a sheep can't oil itself. It's low down, little legs, barely see, soak up water when it gets wet. All kind of predators trying to lay eggs on it and destroy it. So the shepherd rubs the head of the sheep with oil. So when the parasite or the fly lands, it can't get nowhere. Because flies can't walk in an oily surface. They get stuck and can't move no further. You know what I'm looking for the Lord to do for me in 2019, Sister Connie? I want some enemies to be headed my way and they get stuck in the oil that's on my head. He anoints my head with oil and my cup, which means I'm not only blessed, I'm overwhelmingly blessed. I'm not only a conqueror, I'm more than a conqueror. I don't just have a full cup. I know it's midnight. I don't just have a full cup, but my cup is running over. Change your appreciation. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Hey, do you know how much stuff do you know how much stuff the Lord has been protecting you from? You couldn't even see. Reason you couldn't even see it is because them legs you got. You. Hey, in case you didn't know it, you is a sheep. Oh, maybe I didn't make that clear earlier. You be a sheep, which means it doesn't matter how tall you are physically. When it comes to how much you need God, all of us are low down, half blind. If we get close to water, it makes us too heavy to walk. And we got parasites, wolves, and flies looking for us all the time. But when the Lord is your shepherd, you shall not want. And even if you got to go through the valley, your resolve is, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Which means it doesn't matter what tries to get you. You have a shepherd who can handle whatever you face. And if you're not walking in his protection, it is not his fault. It's yours. And the more you can appreciate your 1 through 3, you can handle your 4 and 5 and enjoy your verse number 6. Surely, surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. God, we thank you now for the dangers seen and unseen. Thank you for your divine protection. You are the God who takes care of us. Help us to change what we allow to come out of our mouths. We will take away our complaining and replace it with praise and adoration. Help us to see ourselves the way you see us. Help us to cast down any thought, any opinion that is not like your thoughts and your position toward us. Now, Lord, we thank you for a new day. Thank you for a new year. Thank you for bringing us when we didn't know how to bring ourselves. We rejoice in all that you are and all that you will do. In Jesus'